Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Emily Dow. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Academic Affairs at the Maryland Higher Education Commission. This is our first meeting of probably a few of the Advisory Council on Workforce Shortage. Before we get into our agenda, I just want to say out loud that this meeting is being recorded, and we will post the recording of this meeting onto our website in lieu of meeting minutes. So please be cognizant of that. For those of you not familiar with Google Meet, the recording will record your video when you are speaking, but if you are not speaking, it is not recording your video. Okay, with that, let's walk through some welcome, introductions, and roll call. I do believe Secretary Rye, our Secretary of Higher Education, will be joining us, but I do not see him on the screen. So we'll dive right into membership, and when he joins, I will pause for a minute to give him a moment. Okay, let me share my screen. Again, this advisory council is established by statute. The statute itself identifies with specificity the membership of this council, and so at the bottom of the agenda has the current membership list. Since this is the first time the council is convening, I will call your organization, and if you can introduce your name, your title, and your role at your organization, that would be great. So I have introduced myself. I'm Emily Dow. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Academic Affairs. I work with all the colleges and universities on a variety of initiatives, this being one of them around particularly program development and aligning that with workforce need. I actually do have a couple of MHEC colleagues that I will point out real quick. I have my counterpart, Jeff Newman, Assistant Secretary for Finance and Administration, on the call. We also have Al Dorset, who is the director of our Office of Student Financial Assistance, who oversees this grant, the scholarship. We also have Trish Gorman-McCown, who is our director for Academic Affairs. And I think we have a couple of other MHEC folks on the call. I do want to recognize Soma Kadia. She is our Assistant Attorney General on the call, so she can certainly help us navigate any legal matters. And then we also have Glendetta Matthews, who also works in the Office of Student Financial Assistance, and then Alex Wynn, who is part of the Academic Affairs team. So that's the MHEC crew that is here to listen in and figure out our next step. With that, let me turn it over to the Department of Labor. Our colleagues from Department of Labor, are you on and willing to introduce yourself? Michael on the call. Okay, he's not, so we'll come back to him. Governor's Workforce Development Board.
Hello, my name is Ashley Baldwin. I am a program manager with the Governor's Workforce Development Board. I am here in proxy. Our executive director is out on leave and our deputy director is running a little late, so I am here in support.
Great, thank you. Glad to have you, Ashley. Department of Commerce.
Hi, this is Sarah Shepard. I am the director of our new Office of Talent and Workforce. So happy to be here.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And I see that we have your name misspelled, and we will get your title corrected on this list. Department of Health. Even though the list doesn't have somebody, I know we have somebody from Department of Health on the call.
So I think you're talking to me. So I am the Secretary's designee officially. I just wasn't aware of it until today. So anyway, I am the acting director for the Office of Healthcare Access and Workforce Development, as well as the director for the Primary Care Office program.
Great, thank you. Glad to have you, Liz. MSDE.
Good afternoon, Krishna Tulur, Deputy Superintendent for Finance and Operations, overseeing MSD's human resources and other business streams. Good to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I do not believe we have somebody from the Senate, but I do believe Delegate Harris was potentially going to join us. Is Delegate Harris with us? If not, we will move on to our representatives from the University System of Maryland.
So, Lindsay Ryan here, Executive Director of Economic Development.
Great.
Probably
Thank you.
just rejoined, it looks like.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. Glad to have you. And Jennifer? Oh, I know she's on the call. She might be trying to unmute herself. So we'll jump to the next one. And
and here I am. I'm here.
Sure.
Sorry. I'm driving. I apologize. I'm Jennifer Lynch. I am the Associate Vice Chancellor for Education and Engagement.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Glad to have you on. Morgan State University.
Yes, great day, everybody. Omar Mohammed, Director of the Entrepreneurial Development and Assistance Center here at Morgan State University.
Great. Thank you. Glad to have you on board. St. Mary's College.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cindy Greb, and I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Career and Professional Development at the college. I'm also an alum, and we implement the LEAD program, which is a Learning Through Experiential and Applied Discovery, and work on workforce development boards across the state of Maryland. So thank you for having us.
Great. Thank you. Maryland Chamber of Commerce. Do not know if we have anybody from Maryland Chamber of Commerce. Okay. We will hop down to MICUA, Maryland Independent College and University Association.
Good afternoon. I'm Matt Power, the president of the Maryland Independent College and University Association.
Yeah, hello, I'm Brad Sims. I'm president of Capital Technology University.
Great. Thank you. And then we'll move on to our representatives from the Maryland Association of Community Colleges.
Good afternoon, Brad Phillips, Executive Director for the Maryland Association of Community Colleges.
That was perfect timing, Brad. And good afternoon. My name is Ellen Flowers Fields. I'm the Vice President at the College of Southern Maryland for Continuing Education and Workforce Development. So Emily, my title there, this needs an adjustment too.
Thank you. We will get that corrected for you. Sorry about that, Ellen. Thank you. And then our Maryland Association of Nonprofits.
Hi, good afternoon. Delighted to be here with you. I'm Heather Iliff, President and CEO of Maryland Nonprofits.
Great. Thank you. Is there anybody on the call who has not had a chance to introduce themselves?
I may have missed it. Walter Simmons from Employed Prince George's and the Prince George County Workforce Board.
Great. Thank you. Glad to have you on board, Walter.
Hi, and this is Michael Sires. I'm the Chief Economist for the Maryland Department of Labor.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And then we also have a new addition from the MHEC crew. That is our Deputy Secretary. I will let her introduce herself.
Thanks so much. Buenas tardes a todos. It's great to be here this afternoon. Elena Quiroz Livanis, month 2.5 here on Team MHEC. Really excited for this afternoon's conversation and grateful for all of you for taking the time to be here with us. Thank you, Dr. Dow.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So with that, I do not know if we need the full 90 minutes, but I felt like we needed a bit more than an hour to get through some of this information and really spend some time thinking about next steps and what this looks like. So let me share a few things with you all. Let me go into, I just have a few slides prepared. I'll just do it in our okay. MHEC is responsible for a number of scholarships and grants. There is one specific grant opportunity called the Workforce Shortage Student Assistance Grant. The purpose of this grant is to provide financial assistance to students enrolled at a Maryland college or university to address the workforce shortage needs in the state. This is an active grant that we have been issuing out over the past several years. The grant requires a service obligation. So when a student completes their program of study, they are expected to work in Maryland in the field, and we then will cover the tuition costs. So know that there is a service obligation. We do have, again, folks from our Office of Student Financial Assistance who can speak a little bit to the grant itself, but we are not here necessarily to talk about the grant. What we are here to do today is to talk about which fields, industries, or occupations we have a workforce shortage in, and in which the grant should be applicable to. So let me stop there and offer up a couple of suggestions. Because we will not spend really any time today talking about the grant itself, the scholarship itself, if you have specific questions about the scholarship, who's eligible, how much money it is, anything like that, which I'm sure are things floating through your head right now, if you can put them in the chat, we will make sure we get answers to those questions, and we can provide an update at our follow-up meeting. Knowing that that's how we will proceed about the grant itself, let me just take a minute and see if there are any immediate pressing questions about the grant. And like I said, eligibility requirements, we'll give you answers to. If you go up on our website, you can see all that information. But is there anything pressing about the grant? Okay. Okay, go for it, Brad.
So sorry, you knew I'd have a question. It's really hard to conceptualize. I hear what you're saying, and I agree. I know the direction you're going with this. But conceptually, I think what stalled this out so many years ago is because all of the funding that was in the grant itself was basically already committed to special interests like firefighters, childcare providers, and all the other sort of grants that are being awarded through the Workforce Shortage Assistance Grant. Are you thinking about shaking it up? Okay, all right, that's the question. So we can think about this as truly a workforce shortage grant with funding that can shift between occupational workforce shortage areas. Okay.
Exactly. Yep. So I would like, for those who are familiar with this grant, start with a blank page. Pretend like none of our current fields are on a list. Let's start brand new. What should be the industries, occupations, fields that should be eligible for this grant? So Ellen, I see your note, some historical information. We can certainly get that information out to the council just so that you have that situational history for sure. So Brad, to your point, yeah, just to catch everybody up to speed. Al, do you have anything you want to add to any of that? Do you want to, and it's totally fine if not, but just want to give you a moment to talk about the operations of the grant itself.
No, nothing really to add, and apologize. I had to run out for an emergency, so I'm on my phone. But nothing really added. It's just really looking at, as Brad said, there were areas already identified for workforce shortage. So the grant was able to move through those different areas based off individuals that applied. But any area outside of what was originally established within legislation was not added. So this is the time to really look at, are those areas still those, dire need areas? Are there other areas that should be added? Just overall, the vision of the program.
Great. Thank you, Al. Brad?
I'm so sorry. But to do, I think what you're suggesting that this can do, will it require a legislative correction to take out the language around childcare, around firefighters, around those other sort of special interest groups that were maintained in statute?
Potentially, that is a good question. We can come back to this group about the ramifications around statutorily, outlined all of the different named scholarships.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can talk about that at a later meeting for sure.
Okay. I'll stop for a while.
No worries. Thank you, Brad. Matt.
Thank you, Emily. Can you just ballpark the annual funding level for the grant fund as a whole?
Sure. Can I ask Al? Al, do you know the ballpark funding?
Ballpark funding was about $1 million, I believe.
Total.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. But we again, Ellen, to your point, we'll get you some historical information. Jennifer. Oh, she left. I imagine she unmuted herself. She left thinking she unmuted herself. We'll give her a minute to join back in. There she is.
Sorry, I went to hit unmute and got off instead.
Yeah. No worries.
I hit the wrong button while I was looking down quickly. If it's $1 million, I just have a question. If it's $1 million and legislatively we have identified areas, is there a carve out that we're talking about availability, or are we talking about making legislative recommendations to go back and change existing carve outs?
Potentially both. I think and that's kind of what we'll get at towards the end of the meeting. What are our next steps in terms of recommendations? What more information do we need to gather? And are the recommendations, we certainly need to make recommendations about workforce shortages, but I think it's well within the purview of this advisory council to make recommendations for potential legislative changes as well.
Thanks.
Yep. Soma.
I just want to give as a short answer, and I can certainly go into the rest of it later at a future meeting. But as a short answer, this is an advisory council to the commission. So all recommendations will be made to the commission, and any other next steps will come from the commission.
Thank you for that clarification. So to Soma's point, what would need to come from this group is a written document, a written memo to our commissioners making recommendations specifically about, so let me jump to the next slide, specifically about priority workforce shortage fields to be included in the grant program, and the removal of fields that in the advisory council judgment no longer qualify as workforce shortage fields. So those are the recommendations that will need to go to the commission. If there are additional recommendations, we can certainly put that in the memo and document specifically legislative recommendations to make legislative changes. So as you see this on your screen, this is what this council is expected to do. Identify workforce shortage fields in the state, identify priority workforce shortage fields to be included in the program, and recommendations on the removal of fields. Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you. Just to, again, hopefully help clarify, and I am not familiar, I have not previously, been familiar with the grant program. So for example, if this group recommends that I guess my question is, all of these programs, do they have dollar values attached to them, or is it one large pool? And I'm asking that because, removing one program that only has had a couple of applicants, but those applicants have been served well, probably shouldn't be a big focus because it's not taking from the, $1 million pool. So I know there was a question in there really, but hopefully you got what I was asking.
No, that's fair. And again, we can provide some of that historical data of what fields have been funded in the past. So what I'm hesitating on is, I think we could find out, please do not quote me on this, but I can discuss internally, kind of long-term outcomes of the students who receive the grant. So certainly they need to meet the service obligation of working 1, 2, 3, 4 years in the state after completing their program, depending on how long they were funded for. But then did they stay in the state even beyond that? So we can maybe talk with MLDS to do some initial analyses around students who have received this grant. The reason why I hesitate is, do we have the historical data for that to be able to follow them with substantive time? So I can certainly take that on and talk with MLDS to see if we can look at that analysis as well. So for example, are we, one of the categories, I believe, and Al, correct me if I'm wrong, is early childhood educators. If we find through some of that work that early childhood educators not only work in the state, but they are staying in the state after their service obligation compared to maybe other fields or other professions, that is what I'm hearing is that is information this advisory council would like to have. Is that wrong? Ellen.
I'll just share my personal thoughts. I think that would be wonderful information to have if it's available. I think for me, it would also be insightful to know if there are other state programs that support workforce retention for specific disciplines. I know longstanding there's been scholarship for educators, for teachers who stay and work and remain, especially in urban communities. There's grant opportunities there to support them. Where other occupations may already be buttressed from other funding sources would be good in helping to streamline this.
Great. So if I can just make sure I heard you correctly, information about other scholarship and grant funding opportunities that are related to, so for example, we have the Teaching Fellows Scholarship. So is that, should we redirect folks for teaching? That's the scholarship everybody should be working towards so that we can work on the workforce shortage in different areas, potentially.
Potentially, I mean, that being said, without knowing the funding mechanism or the requirements, but just in general to know what other sources are supporting specific industry, I think is a good thing to consider.
Okay, we can work to pull together some of that information as we dig a little deeper into some of these, again, occupations, industries, fields. I think Walter was next, and then we'll go to Liz.
Thank you. I think one of the things that we are focused on right now is when we talk about occupation and industry and shortage, is really talking from a NAICS code, NAICS, the industry, and then identifying the occupation either through a SOC code, SOC, or a job title code, which is an ONET, O-N-E-T. But because there's been, we're working with Lightcast, who has several contracts with other state agencies as well, is to really narrow when we're doing our career pathways and identifying shortages in Prince George's County. What we've realized is that the word that we're using or the job title doesn't actually match the NAICS code. So then, I guess I saw Michael on, then that caused an issue when you're talking with an actual economist and really identifying the shortage, because the job title that's being used for the funding source doesn't match the actual data because the economist is using a SOC or NAICS code. So I think as we move forward, we really, I think we should, whatever we've witnessed, reference the actual NAICS and SOC code or ONET code, whatever we're using, and then look at, like Ellen said, really look at the career pathway and then figure out how do we best leverage the stackable credentials, and we'll figure that out. That's where the SOC codes will come in. So I think whatever as we move forward, we'll make our recommendations to the commission we should align everything with the appropriate NACE and SOC code or ONET code as appropriate, so that we can actually have the right data from an economic standpoint.
Great. Thank you, Walter. You're getting ahead of us because we're going to jump into that methodology next. So thank you for those comments. Liz.
I'm glad you said methodology because that's what I was thinking. I'm used to looking at healthcare occupations and utilizing a methodology. How many of these providers do we need for this number of population? I didn't hear that talk. I heard about justifications and organizations' recommendations. I was just wondering, will we also be exploring methodologies to kind of make sense? How many of these, this fire person that we need for this population, will we be looking at those as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what I will, so let me pause here and just make sure, are there any questions about the role of this advisory council? Again, it's fairly straightforward, but definitely a heavy lift and a very important lift. But prioritizing workforce shortage fields and determining if any fields need to be removed. So let's transition into proposed methodology and what MHEC, the agency, has been working on over the past couple of months in collaboration with Department of Labor and Department of Commerce. Through a bill that was passed last legislative session, House Bill 1244, our agency is expected now to develop a statewide workforce needs analysis. This is primarily for the purpose of academic program development. But as we started getting into this work and in talking with Al Dorset, our director for Office of Student Financial Assistance, we realized we could maybe leverage this analysis to inform the workforce shortage grant and in identifying in-demand, specifically in-demand occupations. So as I think many of you have already seen, we circulated a draft analysis of this work right before the holidays in December. It is up on our website and publicly accessible. There's a link in the agenda to our webpage with this information. What this analysis includes is 4 appendices, which is what you can see on your left-hand side of your screen. And it would be my recommendation that for this work, we focus on Appendix A and potentially, maybe Appendix B, depending on where you all want to go. But at least with Appendix A, we've identified, and again, in collaboration with Department of Labor and Department of Commerce, in-demand occupations. This appendix will be updated annually. So the version that you're seeing right now is the first version, and you can see our annual cycle that we would update it and release it at the start of every calendar year. So know that this is the first iteration, and methodologically, we're open to new ideas. We have a survey up on our website to provide general feedback from everybody, not just for the purposes of this advisory council. So definitely, if you have strong opinions, we want to hear it. Please let us know. So let me walk you through Appendix A, which again, I think would be the focus for this council. Appendix A identifies what we call right now in-demand occupations. We sourced this list from two primary sources. One is data from the Maryland Workforce Exchange, which is housed with the Maryland Department of Labor and functions much like a job posting board. So it gives us a sense of the number of job postings, the demand for a particular occupation based on Maryland need. Second, we sourced this from the Maryland Occupational Projections from the Department of Labor, which is ultimately sourced from the U.S. Department of Labor. I know we have Michael from Department of Labor on the call. So Michael, if I get any of this wrong, please correct me, because this was done in significant collaboration with Department of Labor. What we did is we took occupation codes using these two sources and identified occupations requiring more than a high school diploma, so essentially anything in the post-secondary realm, which includes certificates, includes non-degree education, but post-secondary non-degree education, as well as associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, and graduate education. So anything with more than a high school diploma, occupations with more than 1,000 new job postings in the 2023 Maryland Workforce Exchange, and occupations with more than 1,000 total new openings between 2022 and 2032. And that is projection data that again comes from Department of Labor. And with that, we get 208 occupations identified as in demand. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pull up the actual appendix. While I'll do that, please, Liz, go for it.
Sorry, I was just thinking, I understand in demand and the most popular job postings and hirings. My question is, what if someone's posted a job, but they just can't fill it? Does that have anything to do with the in-demand list as well?
Oh, great question. I don't know the technicalities behind the Maryland Workforce Exchange. I don't know if Michael's able to answer that question.
Yeah, I can hop in. Absolutely. So if someone is unable to fill that job, it still counts as an open position. So it's still a measure of current need. So the 1,000 does include positions that people have posted, and they could have posted, it's total in 2023. So they could have posted it and then filled it within a week, or they could have posted it and it could have remained open for several months. Both of those would count as one open position.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And I will say, just as a matter, I feel the need for our projections economists, but in addition to using data from the US Department of Labor, we do also do our own projections and our own modeling for our occupational and industry level forecasts as well. So I just have to give him a little bit of credit and a shout out, even though he's not on the call. But we are, I'll just say, more than happy if anyone does have questions about either data source outside of this, please feel free to give me either send me an email or give me a call. I'm more than happy to walk through any details on our data.
Great. Thank you, Michael. So I do want to share, so this is our website. I'll put it in the link so that you don't have to hunt for it. And if you scroll down, you'll get to draft Appendix A, and there you can find the PDF. We are working to upload the Excel files so that you can sort and manipulate as you see fit. So that is forthcoming. But nonetheless, there is a PDF version. Before I start sharing my screen, I do see Secretary Raya on the call, so just want to give him a moment to say hello.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I apologize for starting a little late. I was in office and working on things and couldn't keep track of time. So no, thank you very much. It's important work. As you know, this council was in place for many years, but the shortage areas that were identified many, many years ago, they have remained the same. We haven't changed. As you know, our state has changed, our economy has changed. There are different priorities, different things. So it's very important that we look at this again and see what changes we'd like to bring to this list of shortage areas. While we are doing this, we don't want to take forever to do this, as we have tendency of analyzing a lot of things and taking more time. So I think, I will not give a date, but very, very soon, we have all the information, all the data. Let's make the decision. And I think this group can think about how to be strategic about identifying those areas. Do you want to have all 292 areas at once? Or we can say, okay, these are 5 areas we want to focus for now, And, 2 years from now, or maybe even next year, we can come back and try to make some changes. So let's look at the data. Let's look at what makes sense, and let's be strategic about it. And in a very timely manner, let's come up with a new set of rules. Some of these occupations will probably stay, or some may change. But whatever it is, I think we have been charged to come up with a new list that reflects today's Maryland and needs of our economy today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Rai. So perfect timing. I will share my screen, and if you can also follow along on your own screen. So here's our draft Appendix A, based on that criteria. And right now it is sorted by this total new opening. So again, Walter, to your earlier point, we are using SOC codes. Those who are not familiar, these are occupational codes identified by the federal government, and they have descriptions about what is expected for each of these occupations. And that is the holder of what that job is. So it's not a job title, and it's not necessarily any one industry. So take this all in the context of occupation. You'll see from the first two, certainly there's going to be a high demand for folks in the business fields, whether we're talking about general managers or just business operation folks. But as soon as we get down into these other occupations, you can see nursing assistants, registered nurses, medical assistants in the health field. We also see a number of non-degree post-secondary programs, CDL drivers, bookkeeping, accountants, and auditors. And then, of course, we have our need for teachers. Elementary school teachers are right up there in the mix. We've got middle school teachers, secondary school teachers, and the like. If you scroll down, you'll see all of the occupations that are listed here. Again, in order of demand over the next 10 years. So total new openings from growth, labor exits, and transfers between 2022 and 2032. Questions on this document? Any kind of knee-jerk response, thoughts on the organization of identifying these, what we are calling in-demand occupations based on that inclusion criteria? Yes, Liz.
So I got to cheat a little because you guys, Bryson shared this with me the other day. So, and I was trying to wrap my head around this. How do you show underserved occupations utilizing this? Are you saying that if there's a lot of job openings, but not a lot of job postings, that shows that it's underserved?
No, so this is what we would, I don't think we're using the term underserved. I think that's why we're using the term in demand, is because it's both being projected that we are going to need a number of people in these fields, more than 1,000 over the next 10 years. We have evidence from historical data from 2023 Maryland Workforce Exchange that bolsters some of these occupations. So for example, we go into nursing assistants, not only do we have the data point that it's projected that we're gonna need 38,000 in the next 10 years, and there were 13,000 job postings in 2023.
Okay. So the only thing that, to me, that's missing is how many do we have now?
Fair enough. So I think you're getting us to Appendix B, which you all may find useful in this analysis. You may not find useful. So let me hold that thought, and we'll get into Appendix B in a minute. Jennifer.
Yeah, Emily, has there been any crosswalk of looking at this information versus, sort of anything that the Department of Commerce has done? When I look at this initial list, I'm wondering just about the impact of turnover on these numbers. These are fields, CNAs, med techs, CDLs, that also have high rates of turnovers. And so you would have higher rates of postings in MWE. And so, it may show up as an overrepresentation in this list, but I'm also sort of wondering, so I'm wondering about that as one point of just how are we sort of accounting for potential oversampling. But then my second question is, if we're really talking about scholarship programs, I want to be mindful to look at what are going to be high need in the time that it would take for somebody to get the necessary education. So that may be anywhere from 18 months to 4 years out. And I think my initial question is while we know things are in high demand by sheer numbers, things may also be in high demand because we need them and don't have them, but there may not be 1,000 openings, but those openings that are there are incredibly critical to the economy of Maryland. And I want to be mindful that numbers don't always equate to importance. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, for sure. So in terms of turnover, I will say a few words, but then I'll see if my colleagues from Department of Labor, Department of Commerce want to add anything to it. The projection does include people exiting the profession, and it does recognize transfers. So I see Michael I don't want to misspeak. So Michael, let me turn it over to you.
That you hit the nail on the head. So Jennifer, to your point, I think you're absolutely right. So if there is higher turnover in occupation, so say CNAs, then that is going to be reflected in both in terms of total current job postings as well as expected future job postings. I think what's harder is to your second point, trying to kind of disentangle, if there is a lot of turnover, there's going to be a lot of demand still for those occupations because employers are still going to be trying to fill those open positions. So we haven't taken the steps here to kind of rank occupations in terms of importance or GDP per capita or anything like that. It's just in terms of the numbers of open positions. For all of these, we do have, baseline data in terms of total employment, wages, all sorts of different methods that we might want to look at to say are these occupations that either some of our students might be interested in pursuing further, or how do we kind of match up, high-paying jobs with in-demand occupations. So we have the ability to further refine this, I think, but I'm not sure if that fully addressed all of your comments or not.
We'll give her a minute. Jennifer?
Yeah, sorry. It does. I think one of the things that I want to be thoughtful about is just making sure that we aren't in some way overrepresenting particular groups, even though when I look at it, of course, everything in healthcare continues to be a critical shortage. We know teachers are a critical shortage. But I'm just thinking about how we're sort of triangulating this data to also make sure that when you're talking about grants that are $1 million, it's not a ton of money. And so I think just making sure that we're really being strategic in how we think about what those really critical shortages are.
Yeah, and I think this is maybe more of a item for MHEC, but I will say that, right now we have that second from the rightmost column is completely aggregated. So it's total new job openings over the next decade in terms of growth, labor force exits. So that might be retirements or people going back to school, as well as transfers, which would be people changing jobs. Oftentimes it's kind of your more typical type of turnover that you might see. We can disaggregate that number and so just look at growth, just look at labor force exits. So kind of your typical rates of, retirements or people leaving, especially more lower paid occupations to go back to school. So that's all, there's all sorts of different types of information within our projections that we could make available if folks are interested in that. And some of that data does live on our website as is too. So I can happy to direct folks there too if people want more information.
Great. So we are open to adding information to this to help this advisory council make decisions about the inclusion of specific fields for the purposes of the grant. Okay, let me bump over to Walter.
Is the inclusion on in-demand occupations, we talk about job posting, is it already included? Have we thought about the jobs that are being filled using temporary work visas? Because that could also be a high shortage if there is people, but we're having to fill the positions with, we don't have a U.S. born pipeline, and because such, our businesses are having to leverage visas.
I do not know if we have that information. Again, I turn over to Michael to see if that's something Department of Labor has access to.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure how, say, a job posting for an H-1B visa would show up within the Maryland Workforce Exchange. I believe it would be captured because that posting all has to be reported publicly, and that's the source of where the Maryland Workforce Exchange is getting its data, very similar to a Lightcast or some other group. So to the extent that those public postings are publicly available and brought in, they would be included. I'm just not 100% sure offhand.
So the visa data wouldn't be in the Maryland Workforce Exchange, but the employment visas would be in another division in labor. I'm not specific which one, but it wouldn't be in the labor exchange, but the positions filled in the visas would be in labor somewhere.
Yeah, and we do have some of that information. I do think that some of the workforce postings for H-1B visas would work their way into Maryland Workforce Exchange, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I can reach out to our folks on the Maryland Workforce Exchange side of labor too and see if they have more information. But you're right, to your point. If not, then that's definitely another source of information that could be brought in here.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I brought it up is when Jennifer mentioned like clarifying shortages. If our businesses are having to go in the additional route of becoming sponsors, utilizing additional business revenue to fill vacancies through visa sponsorship, that would clarify to me a shortage and really a pipeline issue that we could address through the grant program, so that businesses don't have to go through the additional financial strain or work to sponsor temporary work visas.
Thank you, Walter. That's helpful thinking, and something I think for the other council members to think about as we, again, identify where this grant funding should be directed to. So I don't know if we're going to have the data. So back to your question, do we have that data to inform this? It sounds like, Michael, you'll see what you all can pull and how we can. Great.
Yeah, and I will say just a very cursory glance. I don't think this is everybody, but there are several hundred job postings right now on the Maryland Workforce Exchange that do reference H-1B visas. So this may be data that's already included, but we'll do a little bit more digging and see if we can get there for sure.
Great. Let me pop over to Matt.
Thanks, Emily. Michael, just two quick questions. One is, can you talk a little bit about the rationale for 1,000 being the magic number for both? And then also, given that this is sort of state and regional, is there any regional component, or are these really just statewide? Thanks.
Yeah. So I'll let Emily answer the question on the 1,000, but I can say that we do have all of this information is available both statewide as well as regionally. So we make our statewide projections and projections at the local workforce development area sort of released annually. So our most recent ones that go from 2022 to 2032 were released this past summer. We're hoping to release another set of projections this coming spring. For those of you that aren't completely familiar with our local workforce development areas, they're generally the size of a county for our larger counties, and then for some of our smaller counties, they're grouped together into regions. So Western Maryland is all grouped together, Garrett, Allegheny, Washington. We have 2 regions that represent the Eastern Shore. So that information is not necessarily within Appendix A, but if folks are interested, I'm more than happy to send over information on whatever region of the state you're in or interested in, and we're happy to make that information available.
And Matt, to that on region, that is the expectation for next year's iteration of this work, is to provide this at a regional level within the state. To the magic number of 1,000, that was just honestly a round number to work with. There is no, especially for the Maryland Workforce Exchange, that just felt like a number of substance. As it relates to the projections, there was a little bit of logic in so much that it would be about 100 people each year, new openings, if we just divide that number by 10 over a 10-year average. And again, that was just a number that was of substance and meaningful. We are open to other cutoff points, but that was the logic as a starting point. Any thoughts on that, Matt? Is that good? Did we answer your question?
I appreciate it. It'd obviously be somewhat helpful to know if you did 500, does that make it go to 10,000 careers, or what is the different occupations? I mean, I don't know the sensitivity of the different cutoffs, but it might be useful for the group to know.
Sure. So you want us to do a 500 cutoff? Is that what you would?
I think it'd be interesting to see for certain, to see if it triples it or.
We can do that. Totally reasonable. Okay, Al.
I think Brad was before.
I think Brad was before me.
Oh, was Brad before you? I'm so sorry, Brad.
It doesn't matter, Al. If you want to go ahead while I collect my thoughts, feel free. Maybe you'll answer my question.
Well, I was just going to say, in regards to the amount of the grant and the award amounts, I don't know if that is particularly where we want to kind of consider and focus at this point in time, because those can change based off this, these recommendations or anything else, right? The idea really is, regardless of the amount of the grant, what occupations are found to be the needed occupations that we need to identify and focus on. And then once those are identified, then we can look at the grant if additional amounts need to be requested or anything like that.
Great. Thank you, Al. Over to you, Brad.
Yeah, thank you, Al, too. I mean, this is actually a kind of a harder thing to do than it looks like on the surface. And as I look through the statute, and I know, Emily, you didn't want to talk about prior committed fields, but it's sort of an important aspect because MHEC is also charged with removing shortage fields that are listed if, in their judgment, the field no longer qualifies as a workforce shortage field. But just so that you know, when I looked at the list that you provided, there's a lot of overlap already on the current list. So you have school teachers, social workers, nurses, childcare providers, developmental disabilities, mental health, childcare, juvenile justice providers, physical and occupational therapists, and then this just broad public servants, which isn't really defined. But you have the task of determining if any of those are no longer a workforce shortage area. And you're talking about a scholarship that's a little over $1 million that awards, I don't know, what was it? I saw a number, 300 students a year. I mean, not only is there an opportunity to a challenge to take these career fields off the list, but to add new ones. Is there any opportunity to make the recommendation to increase the funding to actually make a dent? I mean, is there any evidence that any of these 6 or 7 fields through this scholarship program have actually influenced these shortage areas that we could use to sort of get more funding in this, to be able to expand it beyond 500 or 1,000? Because it's going to be very hard to take some of these off the list, in my just quick assessment. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think that's up to the purview of this advisory council on recommendations around expanding funding, or if it is the council's interest to narrow a focus to one field, knowing the existing funding structure. That is something for this council to debate and come to consensus on for recommendation.
I think that this is for this council to provide those recommendations, Brad. Your questions are well taken. With $1 million, if we have 100 different fields, we're not going to make a dent, right? So can we be strategic with $1 million? What we can do now? Okay, these are the 2 areas where we really want to make a dent. Then ask for more funding and other things, and with there also we can prioritize. More funding will go to these 3 areas. Things that not just fill the positions, but something that gives Maryland a competitive edge, right? That's where I think it's important. And the non-credit program and others, I think we have to be open to those ideas.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Brad. Jennifer.
I just wanted to elevate in the chat. I think it was Lindsay who asked the question about the language that says that this should be for a public good or a public benefit. And I do think that that is a really important part of this. And I'm wondering if that shouldn't be our first point of sorting. Like we've sort of sorted by 1,000 job postings, but should we be starting with the question of which of these, what are the things that are public good or public service, and then kind of see what falls away. And to that end, I mean, I think when we talk about CDLs can be a lot of things. It can be Amazon drivers, or it could be school bus drivers. And so, I mean, I like Amazon, it's a public good for me, but I don't know if it's necessarily a public good for the whole. And so I do have concerns that some of these codes have nuances in them where some aspects may be for a public good and some may not.
Noted. That's yep. Fair point. So thank you for leveling up Lindsay's comment in the chat. Lindsay also shared, a quick back of the envelope math. Again, we will, I'll work with Al to get us some data, historical data of how many students have been awarded, average amount of the award, just for you all to have that situational information. And then Liz, I see your comment. We can certainly add, details to the chart so that you know the sources. Other feedback on Appendix A as currently drafted as a source of information for, again, this council to make some decisions about which industries, which fields, the term that the statute uses is fields, should qualify for the grant. Heather.
Thank you. And I'm new to this group, and this has all been a big learning experience for me. And I'm thinking that perhaps next time we get together, we could take that public benefit framework and work on criteria, because if we're looking at 300 scholarships, the universe of, I don't know how many hundreds were on there, but I was scrolling through it going, yep, to all of those. I wonder if we might bring in like Governor Moore's strategic plan for the state of Maryland. I'm thinking of, there's economic benefits, public benefits, from the nonprofit perspective, I know there are certain shortage areas that are chronic, like social workers and things like that. But we might just prioritize some criteria. And I am learning that these jobs are not tied to specific industries. So, you know, that would just be broad, but that might be, I guess, a next step to see if we can prioritize around where the governor wants the state to be going.
Absolutely noted as a potential agenda item for our next meeting to dig a little deeper into that. Great. Jennifer.
I'm just wondering if, since this list was originally designed for program approval, I think it has potential. I'm also wondering, though, if we go back to the idea around public good, I've heard Secretary Rye, and I really appreciate the need for expediency. And I think that we run the risk of starting to go down rabbit holes that will take us forever. But we do have each of our local jurisdictions, you know, each county has, you know, each county government has their own needs and their own job postings. And so I'm just not sure if we have that voice represented. And it seems like it's a very easy way to start to take a look to say, what is the public good and public need across all of our county governments in terms of what are their highest rates of vacancies and what do they need to fill, and what are they having difficulty with? It seems like that may be something to consider, at least to add that voice to this table, to make sure we're getting that representation. So we're not sort of focusing and funneling into private industry as we're considering this list.
Are you suggesting, so when you say those words, I think of our local workforce development boards, perhaps?
No, I'm thinking local county governments. And yeah, so I mean, because our local workforce boards are employing people across private industry and public as well, whereas our local governments have their own you know, job boards and postings. And I feel like drawing from those postings may help us really quickly narrow what is the public good, because these are public serving positions.
Do you have a suggestion? So this is I'm a little bit out of my territory. Do you have any suggestions on who we could invite? So two questions: who we could invite, and do you have a sense of where we could get kind of that information centralized?
I might first reach out to the Maryland Association of Counties to get that information, or to get their input as to how they would like they think they could collect that information. And this is my off the cuff recommendation.
Noted. So between now and the next meeting, we can certainly do some work to see if we can make progress on that front, and report back. Thank you for that recommendation. Brad.
I just want to highlight what someone put in the chat that talks, and the statute actually defines public good or benefit as service to low income or underserved residents or areas of the state in occupation in the public sector or nonprofit. So I don't know if that changes. I know community colleges are locally tied to their workforce needs and are structured in a way that really provides the sort of training and education that local service areas need. But Jennifer, I don't know if you're talking about specific county government jobs. I don't know. I think is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, well, because I think there's a slight difference in that that local workforce boards help to employ those who are unemployed, so those who are low income, whereas the public, so they can be employed into jobs that are either of public service or not. You know, the idea is that they are then becoming employed, whereas the language of the statute is of public good, which is not the person, it is the position. And so I think that's the distinction. And so we need to make sure that as we're looking at this, is that we're really thinking about the positions that serve the public good, not those individuals who need to be employed.
Brad, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, not really. I mean, I'm thinking a lot about certain occupations that actually have a public benefit and a private benefit. I'm thinking of healthcare providers in a lot of ways that either you work for the state or you work for a for-profit entity. LARP does a lot in this area, the loan assistance repayment plans, to help people who repay their loans that are going into sort of a public service area. And I don't know if the former William Donald Schaefer student assistance grant had a better definition that got rolled into this or not, but that might be worth looking at too. But it's
Fair
just
point.
such a little amount of money to do so much there when there's so much need. So that's the challenge.
Noted. Ellen.
I'll piggyback on Brad's comments as he was in my head as he was speaking, because I think while I certainly agree that the public service, the public good lens is the appropriate one to lean into, it's not restricted to government. So the occupations, even on the list A that you've listed, can exist within government or outside of government. And so if, and I can't speak for labor, but if a county government posted a job and the Maryland Workforce Exchange was pulling the Maryland postings, then they do exist within these numbers. So maybe there's, we could see something by NAICS code under government, how many of these positions fall actually within the public sector, specifically, if we wanted to be able to delineate the difference between these occupations existing within or outside from of the government. But I personally am more interested in the occupation itself than where it sits, because it's the role and the function that serves the public, person.
So let me, Elena, before I hop over to you, Michael, is that something we can break out the demand by NAICS code?
Yeah, we can break out demand by NAICS code. I'm not sure. I just have to go in and see what Maryland Workforce Exchange has relative to the government employment or county governments, state government. But yeah, we can look at vacancy data by industry as well as by occupation. Maryland Workforce Exchange, similar to Lakecast or some other data providers, Jamura, provides that information, so we can take a look and include that.
Great. Thank you. I do want to make sure we have enough time to talk about logistics and next steps. So Elena and then Jennifer, and then maybe one or two more comments, and then we can talk about how we're moving forward.
Awesome, thank you. And this conversation on the public good really stimulated a lot. And I've been talking to our legal staff about the definition. So I also just want to say, I feel like Maryland is ahead of the curve by being so aligned with the public mission of higher education. So I very much appreciate this discussion. So I guess I had a question for Jennifer, the clarifying question. Were you talking about county positions or county level data? I guess I might have interpreted your comment as almost like a grassroots to grass top approach of if we're getting local level data, but I just wanted to ask that, or are you talking about specifically government positions at the county level?
I was thinking yes, and I think my initial thought was that we're really engaging our local leaders to ask them what are their needs in terms of the public good. Some of them are not housed within county government. I think healthcare is a perfect example that it's not housed within government, and yet if you asked every local county executive or county commissioner, they would raise healthcare to the top of their list of need. So I think they're really tuned in. The same thing with nonprofits. Nonprofit support is not going to show up in these codes and in these listings in these very clean ways. It's not going to look like a business manager or something like that. And yet we know that there's a really high level of need for that. And so I think that not having that local government voice at the table, who is really closest to the public good, is just a missing voice in this conversation. And I think they can help us
Thank you.
define
That's
what
helpful.
that data might look like.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciated Brad's point too around the role that institutions play at that local level. So I feel like you're talking about connecting the dots and who is best positioned to do that. State government can play a certain role, county government can play a different role, right? So thanks so much for clarifying.
Other comments before we dive into how we proceed? Okay, so I've taken quite a few notes. I think we MHEC will pull some data, see how we can make some revisions and or add to what was shared today for you all to think about and consider. So we will work towards that for the next meeting. What I will try to do is summarize this via email and some notes to make sure I captured everything so that we can be efficient in responding to the comments that were shared today.
I would like to add one thing, Dr. Dowd, that we are all representing certain constituents. And what we need to do is go back and have a conversation that we are considering this at the state level. This is the $1 million, this is the opportunity, this is what can be done. And take the input and bring it to this group. Obviously, you know, everyone cannot be on this group. This is already a fairly large group, right? So make sure that you talk to your groups and bring their recommendation. I'm looking at Brad, you know, he was going to meet with community college presidents in the next few days or so. It'll be great to get their input on this. How would they like this to be done?
Great, thank you for that, Secretary. So I do, so as Secretary Rai noted, there is energy to revise the list, figure this out in particular for future funding. I think Secretary Rai, correct me if I'm wrong, it would be great if we had some recommendations to our commission by the end of this spring, if possible.
No, I think definitely by end of the spring, not if possible, because although it's only $1 million, but you'll be surprised that all these funds are there, but sometimes they're not being used. So I think we need to think about great opportunity, taxpayer funded program. We can really, students can benefit, the state can benefit. And you know, we don't have to stick to the same list for 10 years, right? Colleges are thinking about meta majors, right? So it's, you know, we can think about healthcare, teaching, whatever, right? So several different occupations or jobs could be part of that, right? So we can think innovatively here. And again, as I said, $1 million, 300 students. How do you make a dent? Right? We had this program for the last, you know, N number of years. If you ask me to say, you know, how did it probably made difference for students who got those scholarships, but did it make a state competitive? Did it provide resources to communities that Jennifer is talking about? So think about, you know, that how do we make a strategic choice here to make an impact through this?
Great. So with that, we likely need to schedule some additional meetings to continue this conversation. I think what I would like to propose, but please feel free to counter or offer alternative suggestions, is that at least for the next, again, knowing that there's urgency to make a recommendation in short order, I would like to make some standing monthly meetings, just using a standardized schedule of sorts. So what I would propose is I'll send out a poll to identify just general working times on a weekly basis that folks are available for, and then try to identify some monthly meetings over the next 3 to 4 months. Does that seem reasonable and kind of the most organized way to schedule some meetings here? And or does anybody have an alternative way to do this, knowing that we have about 16 folks with very busy schedules to accommodate? Okay, we will do that. We will do a poll in the next day or two. Once you see that, if you could respond to it as quickly as possible so that we can start planning out a February, March, April meeting at a minimum, if not into those later months. Okay. With that, I will stop there. As Secretary Rye noted, please do go back to your constituent group, share this information, discuss amongst your colleagues. We will work to provide some additional information, but I think our expectation for the next meeting is really starting to think through narrowing the fields, thinking through our justification for that narrowing, talking about what it means to be a public good, and making some progress on that front. Al.
I was just going to add in with the discussion that we had, it might be good also discussing a criteria for identifying what a shortage field is. Because we've talked about a lot of different things, but kind of what is the criteria that identifies, at least for this group, what a shortage field is that will allow us then to make a stronger assessment.
Noted. And maybe that's what we start with, that incorporates this idea of public good and what we need. Thank you, Al. Glendetta.
I'm sorry, my hand hit the keyboard.
No worries. You're good?
Yes, I'm good.
Great. Okay, with that, we'll stop there. Please do not hesitate to reach out if you have questions. In the meantime, you'll get a few emails from me over the next day or two, and we'll get ready for our next meeting and start pulling together some of this information for you all to mull over. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Much appreciated. Look forward to our next conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you very much.